Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm your host, Tony Stewart. When it comes to money, we tend to focus on numbers, budgets, balances, and returns, but beneath those numbers are emotions, beliefs, and family dynamics that can drive decision-making. Today, I'm joined by Ashley Quamme, Financial Behavior Officer and host of the Planning and Beyond podcast. Ashley, welcome. Great to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited for this conversation. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story and how did it lead you into financial behavior?
Well, we won't start, I was born on April 15th, a rainy, cloudy, sunny day. We won't start there from an origin story standpoint.
All right.
Although it is true. My birthday is April 15th. My dad is a CPA and my husband is a CFP. So I jokingly kind of say in a lot of ways, it feels like it was destiny, maybe meant to be. I did not start out in the finance space. So my education home discipline is in marriage and family therapy. So licensed as a marriage and family therapist, financial therapist. And after, more than a decade of private practice, practicing in the couples and family space, transitioned over into financial therapy more so, and then now into solely working in financial services where I provide fractional chief behavioral officer services, integrating financial psychology into firms, coaching advisors, developing their skill set around communication, and helping their clients as well align their money with their life goals, values, meaning, purpose, all that good emotional stuff, as you kind of mentioned there in your intro.
Well, fantastic. I believe that this is the future of the financial world, especially with the advent of AI, because this is how advisors can continue to have a valuable role. But yet this is relatively new and not completely accepted. So, tell us a little bit about it. Let's back up to financial therapy. What is a financial therapist?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I explain financial therapist as a practitioner who not only has the education, skill set, background, and understanding how money intersects with, maybe mental health or just well-being, but just understanding how those two things are intersected there. At maybe a different way of explaining it is understanding why do you think, feel, do money the way that you do. And for most of us, we have not spent any or a good deal amount of time understanding why we make the financial decisions that we do. What are they rooted in? What are the emotions attached, to that? So financial therapy helps people explore what is below the waters, what we call more of that internal self, and connecting it to why we make decisions the way that we do with our money. So that's maybe just kind of a high level explanation there, at least of what financial therapy is. Happy to dive into any more. I could geek out about it, Tony, so we can go kind of any direction there you want with that.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, I love this topic, because as I mentioned, I think this is where we really need to go as an industry is, I and my interest in this developed, as a fee-based insurance consultant for 30 years. And, I come into some of these situations. Usually I consulted with wealth management advisors, and it'd be, something that was really clear from the numbers, the decision that the client should make, be like a no-brainer. And yet the clients wouldn't do it. They'd either stall or just say, it doesn't make sense. And oftentimes, be an issue that could cause them hundreds of thousands of dollars. And yet it was something that they would still continue to take that track. So I think it's really important to understand that why. So, how can advisors start to think about this, and how do you help advisors start to integrate this into their thinking and their process?
Yeah, it's a loaded question. And I'll answer it in two ways. And it's going to depend on really the advisor here and their comfort level, knowledge base, even. One way to go about this is on the client side, right? Thinking about, okay, why is my client stalling on making this decision? What do I know about them contextually that might be contributing to this? So, for example, are they going through a difficult life transition right now? Are there maybe certain hardships? Are they having to care for aging parents as well? And they're consumed by, raising their own kids and caring for their parents. Maybe there's some context there that is getting in the way of them not following through. Maybe there's some resistance there because of what it might mean, to follow through and get that insurance. From a trans theoretical model of change, like looking, at like taking action and why is there, resistance? What are the thoughts behind it? There, and what questions maybe do I need to ask if they're not in a place of taking action, if they're more in a pre-contemplative kind of state of change. So there's a lot of different ways, I guess, there, right? In terms of if you're looking at integrating some of this on the client side, but from maybe a visual standpoint, think about it like an iceberg, and what you see above the waters is the client resisting following through on whatever the action might be. And if you, as the advisor, are willing to stick your head below the waters and just kind of begin to see or explore or consider, like, oh, there's a lot more here. It's not just what I see above the waters. There could be a lot more, right, below the waters. And what is that stuff that's there? So, that would be kind of on the client side. And there's, Tony, a lot of just kind of different strategies, approaches right there that kind of fall in that. But just from a, kind of general place is integrating could look like trying to understand, why do your clients think, feel, and do the way they do? What's getting in the way? What's below the waters? The other side of that is with the self, integrating, beginning to look at some of this stuff could start with you, like as the advisor. What is my own money story? What are the origins of that? Why did I get into financial planning? What was it about it that was attractive? Was it that I saw my parents struggle growing up and I didn't, like that struggle, and it led to a curiosity on, like, how do I not struggle financially? And one thing led to another, in studying finances, and then, it led you here. What is your origin story with money? Why do you make the financial decisions that you do? Why do you have the investment policy that you do? Some of it might be academic, theoretical, right, from what you've learned, but some of it might also be emotionally based too. And so just looking at just kind of your own stuff there and being willing to explore, just understand some of that. You may not walk away with any big light bulbs. It's okay if like there's not any like big like trauma, negative, terrible things that have contributed to it. The helpful piece is really just understanding like why am I doing the things that I do instead of just I'm just on autopilot and it's just because I'm an advisor and this is just why. So, integration can look like a lot of different things and it's maybe choose your own adventure here, but if you have an interest in starting to kind of explore some of this, you can look at kind of the client stuff, but you can also consider and look at your own stuff as well.
I think that's really valuable because advisors do bring in their own past experiences. Like, for example, I worked with a property and casualty broker, and he'd had a very negative experience with somebody else in the life insurance business, and it really impacted his thought process on involving anybody in the life insurance industry to work with his clients. And so, it took some getting to know him and discussions and everything before we started working together. But it was really, it was my first lesson in like, hey, there's something else that was going on for him. And I had to figure out what was going on for him before I could help him and his clients. And, working through the years is, a lot of my work was actually helping advisors untangle and undo insurance policies that their clients didn't need. And the thing that I found that was the most puzzling is sometimes clients would have psychological attachments to insurance products that were just absolutely not needed and costing them a fortune. And that's the thing I found most surprising. So, what would you advise an advisor who's advise an advisor who's working with a client who has that kind of psychological attachment to a product or service?
Yeah, I think it's that is common. We do see that whether it's a product service. I've seen that show up like with annuities. Just like different, right? Just kind of like things there. Sometimes, I think just kind of a step one is uh, taking a step back and looking at, while this may not be like the recommendation and it may not be great, realizing that it's their ultimately it's their decision.
Hmm.
And, I say we, like as a practitioner, service provider, like, sometimes the goal should not be to get them to do anything different because the reality is we can't get them to do anything different, but we can open up a space and a conversation and a dialogue that could, help to understand, a little bit more what's behind it and gently maybe, I don't know if I want to say challenge, but maybe become curious and help them to become curious around what is their attachment or why is the attachment, to this product maybe so strong. So, you know, thinking of yourself, I think kind of in this way as more of a guide, a like co-facilitator instead of an expert. Sometimes we come at clients, especially when there's like resistance or challenges to, in this case, we'll just say like, certain products. We come at it from like an expert place. Like, let me just educate and throw out all the reasons why this is terrible, why you don't want this, and that does not feel good on the client end. But I think if you can approach a situation like this is not from like an expert, but from a place of curiosity and as like, a guide that co-facilitates maybe just a dialogue of, understanding, uh, it could lead to, you know, maybe a change there. So, there long-winded kind of answer, like there's a mindset, I think, first before you go into any kind of conversation like that. The mindset on the advisor end, meaning like, don't position yourself as the expert. Like you're going to need to kind of take that expert hat off and put your guide hat on, and use curiosity from a little bit more, I guess, just kind of practical place. There's questions like, you know, I understand or I see or I'm sensing that this is, this product, right, really means a lot to you, right? This thing, like, it really means a lot to you, right? And I get that, right? Sometimes we have attachments to certain things. Can you help me understand, a little bit more around what does this insert product like mean to you? Like, why is this so important to you? I'm just curious. Would you mind, helping me understand that? And who knows what they might say? They might say something like, well, when my grandmother died, you know, this, that, and the other, or, for like we had bad advice from an advisor and this is just really what we think. Or maybe there's some element of like security for whatever reason they think it's going to help them to feel more secure or like safe. But opening up, I guess, a space where they can just share a little bit more openly, instead of having to feel like they have to try and defend why they want it. I have the visual in my head of like a like a young like child like crossing their arms, like digging their heels in, and it's like no, no, like no, or maybe even like a teenager, right? And if we can come at it to help, just understand a little bit more and validate, like, I get that this means a lot to you. Their defenses will likely relax a little bit and they might be willing to walk you through some of their thought process and potentially maybe even be open to hearing yours a little bit more. But, that might take a little bit to be able to do that. So, starting with just kind of your own mindset, becoming curious, trying to explore, hey, what's the meaning behind this? What does this mean? Why is this important? Are all great starting places. And then obviously, depending upon, kind of from there, there's a few different ways to walk through how you might go for continuing that kind of conversation.
Well, that's fantastic. I think that's great advice. And that's what I always, that's kind of become my core thing is encouraging people to ask better questions. Because I think until we're not encouraging better questions, consumers are going to continue to find products that, or be involved with products that don't serve them well because they don't even know the questions to ask. And as advisors, we don't always help them in that process. I've done some litigation consulting and I've seen some really bad things, but a lot of it was the consumers didn't know what questions to ask. So, let's flip it around a little bit, for the consumer coming in is how can a client take the power on them to work with their advisor? Do you have any advice for consumers so they have the power?
I think that's a great question. I think that's an important question. Um, you know, I'll try not to sound dismissive or just overly judgmental. But I think out the gate, being willing to just say, like, I don't really know what all of this stuff means. This is not my area, zone of genius. It's not my expertise. And I don't know. Sometimes just being willing to say, like, hey, look, like, I don't know here. I need you to break it down to me at like a crayon's level, right? Very simplistically, and being able to ask for that. I recognize that can be really hard to do. So that's why I'm saying I'm trying not to come across as like just dismissive or like judgmental. But I do think being explicit with whoever it is that you're working with, around, hey, like, I hear what you're saying. I really don't know what to ask because I don't really understand all of this stuff. And while it sounds like you might know what you're talking about here, would you mind breaking this down a little bit more simply. Great advisors, great, relationship service professional relationships, they will explain things, should be able to explain things in a way that is simple, that does not have a lot of jargon, in a way that you are able to connect with and understand. I know that might rub some maybe advisor feathers, practitioner like feathers there, but great advisors, your advisors should be able to explain something, anything, any kind of concept, strategy, in a simplistic way that does not have a lot of jargon. Now, if they are using, right, a lot of jargon, it doesn't mean that they're not a great advisor always, right? But it just might mean they may not have some awareness, or they might think that you do understand what they're talking about. And so if you're nodding along and like, yeah, 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 oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense, they might be thinking that you are tracking and understanding. And so going back to what I said, being just explicit and kind of transparent around, hey, everything that you just said, I heard that it was in English. Like those were English words that I heard. And I have no idea what any of that means. Would you mind maybe breaking this down for me a little bit simpler? Could you explain it as if you are explaining it to a teenager? That is a great just way of approaching things. Like, hey, can you explain this concept to me like you would explain it to a teenager, or a kid? Some people might feel like, oh, that's so demeaning and stuff, but it might just signal to your advisor of oh, I really need to break this down, very, very kind of simplistically. And there's nothing wrong with that. While I work in the finance space, half the time, I don't really know all the things that are being said. And, I've worked with advisors, my husband, right, as a planner, included, will say things sometimes, knowing that I am a, fairly intelligent person, working kind of in the finance, will say things sometimes. I'm like, I don't know what that means. Hey, I need you to break that down. That's how I'll say it to my husband, Clayton, right? Hey, what does that mean? You're talking another language to me. I need you to step back, explain this to me. It's really good for relationship building, on the client end, but on the advisor end. As the client, the reason that's good from a relationship standpoint is that it allows your advisor then to show up for you. And hopefully then for them to be able to, to meet kind of your need. And so that then you're not constantly feeling I don't want to go to this meeting. I don't want to meet with them. I'm dreading it. So you're giving them just kind of some data and being honest and transparent about, if things are difficult, right? To understand where they can meet you, where you are.
Well, that's fantastic advice. And I think that goes back to school where you don't want to be the person who doesn't understand the concept,
Yeah.
and you don't want to be the one raising your hand saying, I have no clue what you're talking about, in class. So,
Yeah, especially for women too, not to dive too much into gender, but stereotypically, right? A lot of female clients, right? They may not be what we might call the CFO, of the household, right? Or they may not have the same level of financial knowledge literacy. And again, that's not demeaning or saying they're not intelligent, but stereotypically, right? We see more males kind of in that in that role. And so I think even as a female speaking up and saying hey, look, my husband, I think he's tracking along, but I might need you to break this down for me a little bit, right? And remember that I am a different person, right, than my partner, or this is what I need. So I think it can be really empowering and just great for the longevity of the relationship overall.
fantastic. And I'm glad you pointed out because this is a topic that I've talked a lot about and had a lot of guests on to talk about, differences in gender and how women approach money. And, a lot of that is that, the statistics that bear out that 80 to 90% of widows will leave their current financial planner. The same holds true for divorcees. And pretty much they'll always work with a female financial planner. And a lot of female financial planners will go out on their own and leave male-dominated firms to run firms that are essentially all women advisors. So there's a lot to this for advisors to understand. And lately, I have been going down the rabbit hole of a newer concept, financial fluency rather than financial literacy, because financial literacy can be very judgmental. It's like if you're not literate, you're illiterate,
Yeah, yeah.
which nobody wants to be told, hey, you're illiterate. But, financial fluency, if you don't know how to speak another language, it's not a big deal. There's no shame. And I think that's something that we need to remember from both sides is, that you want to avoid feeling shame. And if as an advisor, you're making your client feel shame because you're showing off with your expertise and your credentials and all your other stuff, you're not helping your clients. And as you pointed out, you're turning off the woman in the relationship, the spouse. So
Yeah,
valuable
yeah.
advice. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, one other question is, so how does understanding all of this help advisors strengthen their relationship with clients and clients benefit more from their relationship with advisors?
I think at a very basic level, clients are looking for a relationship with you as an advisor. They're looking for a relationship with this kind of question of, are you going to be there for me? Right? Like this like underlying question. Are you going to be there for me when I need you most? That might sound a bit dramatic, right? But when we're looking to build a relationship with someone, and especially around like our money and finances, like it's a very vulnerable and intimate, type of relationship, to allow someone to see all of your numbers, right? The good, the bad, the ugly, like to be privy to all of like these small and or big financial like decisions is really vulnerable on like the client end. Sometimes I don't think advisors realize that. But clients are exposing themselves, to you. Understanding kind of that, understanding, right? Like all of this allows you to be sensitive and compassionate to sometimes how difficult it can be on the client end. Um, how, to, allow someone to see all of that and to make a misstep, like there can be some shame, kind of there. And so I just think knowing kind of all of this, it allows you to be a better practitioner. And I don't just mean making like better recommendations, although it certainly can. Having context can absolutely help you to make better recommendations. But it also just allows you to be just a better person, and just kind of show up easier. And it answers ultimately that question, are you going to be there for me, with, like a resounding yes. Like, yes, I can show up for you. I can be there for you. I can be, accessible, responsive, engaged, right? Just, kind of all of that. And that hits at, kind of that safety place, which really is the driver for building trust and rapport, with clients. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. And, in thinking about my own money is, it's like when I work with an advisor, it's like, I don't want to be judged on the decisions that I've made. It's
Yeah.
like, that's just human. You don't want anybody to say, well,
Look,
that's dumb. You know?
it's bad enough that my husband knows how much I go to Starbucks. I don't want another person to know how much I go to Starbucks, right? Like you talk about fear of judgment, right? So like I
Yeah.
know how much I go. My husband does because we have, joint shared accounts, and it's like, that's bad enough. Like, I don't need another person knowing how much I get, right? So yeah, to your point, like it's vulnerable.
Definitely. And I think, we all need to be aware of that vulnerability. One question before we go into our wrap-up questions is, what is a behavior officer? What kind of work do you do?
Great question. I appreciate you asking that. So what at Beyond the Planned, my company, what we do in providing fractional chief behavioral officer services is we really support firms in three different ways. So we support them at the client level, at the advisor level, and then at the firm level. And so it is a very integrated role offering that we provide. What I have seen is that for a lot of similar maybe types is that they offer, maybe like firm and or advisor like support, or they offer, maybe client and advisor, but it might be two or three. But this is really hitting at all three kind of pillars. And so on the client end, that might look like meeting one-on-one with clients, participating in co-facilitated meetings with the advisor, and the client, running multi-generational family meetings, client-facing webinars. There, the advisor support level is and can look like training, developing skills, some coaching, case consultation, things like that. And, at the firm level, looking at how to, kind of integrate from maybe a process standpoint, meeting structure. How do we integrate maybe financial psychology, behavioral finance? How do we integrate maybe those levels? And then there's also, just kind of the element of team culture too. How do we also look at just the internal culture, making sure that it is healthy, that it is great, and that we're all on the same page there. So three different ways that we support firms kind of in that role as a chief behavioral officer. So a lot of different a lot of different things kind of encompassed in that, but we found great success. It's been pretty amazing to watch some of the firms begin to transform, but also the impact on the clients as well has been really fun, really exciting to see and to grow.
Well, that's awesome. And, I know I'm a fan of your posts on LinkedIn and your podcasts, and we'll talk about that at the end. But, I just love your approach because, as I mentioned before, is I think that this is the future of successful financial services. And what you talk about with the most successful advisors that I know, going back to one of your prior responses, is just like the most successful advisors are the ones who are able to explain things to clients. And that is what I think is the epitome of knowledge, is when you know enough to be able to explain it to someone else in a way that they can understand. And that is really hard because you can get your CFP or your CFA or whatever designation. And I have some designations, and I've taken a lot of classes, but until I was able to explain it to someone else, that knowledge doesn't really help. And
Yeah.
so, I love how you boiled that down because I think that's a good takeaway for people watching and listening, whether or not you're an advisor or you're an expert in your own field.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So cool. So let's get into what I call the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. These are three quick questions I ask all of my guests. The first one is, what money myth are you trying to break?
Oh, money myth that I am trying to break. Okay, so I will answer this actually on more of a personal level, and it's one that I actually really struggled with, and that is what I learned about in college was the latte factor, and courtesy of my husband, who we were then dating at the time, and he was you know, in college taking some of these classes. Anyway, he shared with me that. And so the money myth that I have been working on breaking and would say that I have successfully broken it based on what my credit card statement shows is that at some point, like, it is okay if I want to buy the latte. And if I wanted to buy the latte twice a week, I used to really actually struggle with I can't have this because it's a small purchase and it's going to add up. And if I go and get a coffee once a week, this is bad. Like it's really bad. I should actually take that $5 because $5 a week, multiplied by X number of weeks, and I could, I used to really like struggle kind of with that. And so learning a little bit more and becoming older and wiser, I think, too, understanding that while, yes, sometimes it is the small financial decisions that you make that are important, sometimes what can be more is the larger ones. For example, we have stayed in our home for the last 13, 14 years. It's modest. We don't plan on moving. Like it is, that's like a large or a financial decision of like upgrading your life, right? Sometimes that clients, might, kind of do and struggle with. And so sometimes it's not always the latte factor, the small coffees once a week that can make or break things. Sometimes it's the other, maybe larger financial decisions that are more important. So that is the money myth that I have been working on the last few years of trying to overcome internally for myself, Tony. So it might be self-serving so that I can enjoy more coffee. I'm not sure, but I do think that there's some element of truth there, at least within that.
And that's actually part of one of the get ready habits. I have 8 get ready habits, and it's like, go for the latte because don't deprive yourself of joy. I mean, that's the
Right,
whole point of having money is like, yeah, maybe you don't want to get the latte every day,
right.
um, but don't also deprive yourself of joy because I've talked to a couple of people who've been part of the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. And when they reflect back on it, they go, boy, that was a miserable experience. Nobody said, like, wow, that
Right.
was a great experience.
I could have had so much more guac. Like, I mean, yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I love that. Overcome the latte factor. Get the coffee if you want it.
Get the
That's
coffee,
okay.
get the extra shot of guac when you go and get, Mexican, yeah, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe not get a new car every year. That's where you're going to save some money. So let's get out the time machine for a minute. What is one piece of advice you'd give your younger self if you could go back in time knowing what you know now about money?
Ooh, yeah, I think that I would likely encourage myself to learn a little bit more, learn a little bit more and become a little bit more curious, instead of just assuming that, I can't understand it, it's too complicated, uh, you know, or I'm not interested. There were a lot of like, this is over my head, like, I'm not smart enough, like, to understand some of this. And the reality is that's not true. I may not, and I'm not going to be an expert, but there are elements, that I could learn a little bit more about that would be helpful. So I would go back and just gently kind of push back on that narrative of like, I can't learn, it's too hard, or I'm not smart enough, and gently encourage myself to, maybe learn just a little bit more, even if it's high level, around some of the areas of financial planning.
Definitely. And that's wonderful advice. And, for people who watch and listen, you've heard that from a lot of guests. So, if you're coming from a place, perhaps as a woman or as a person of color who's underrepresented, who doesn't have generational wealth, is that you can always learn. And, that's why I love the concept of financial fluency as opposed to financial literacy, because everybody can learn a foreign language just some people may already speak the language a little bit, and that's the world of money. Some of us grow up, like you mentioned, with your dad being a CPA, so you learned some things about money. My dad was a CPA, so I learned some things about money. But a lot of us don't have that. So, for those of you who don't have that, that's okay. You can still learn the language of money. Anybody can learn it. It's just knowing where to get started. So the final question is, what is your number one tip for changing the way we think about our relationship with money?
Yeah, my number one tip would probably center around being intentional, setting aside time and just being intentional. We live in such a way, and myself included, where we're just on autopilot, kind of the day to day. We go through our routines, all of that, and then fast forward, and it's like, oh gosh, like it's July 31st. I found myself thinking that this morning, Tony, right? Of like, oh my gosh, like it's the end of the month, and so my number one tip would be to be intentional about trying to understand your money, your relationship with it, setting aside time to do that. Blocking, like literal setting aside time maybe to do that, like on a calendar. Yeah, but try to get a little bit more intentional. It doesn't really matter if you spend an hour a week, 30 minutes a month. Like it's just really the act of just getting started somewhere and being intentional and being consistent. So I think if you choose to lean into and do that, the rest will start to unfold, and other things will start to come to the surface, and you might start to do a little bit more than just that. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that's wonderful advice. So that's great. So Ashley, where can people learn more about you? Where do you hang out online, and where can they check out the Planning and Beyond podcast?
Yep. So I hang out primarily on LinkedIn. So you can find me. You can find me there. There are not a lot of Ashley Quammes on there who are in the finance space. So you can find me there on LinkedIn. Um, you can also find me on our website at www.beyondthefp.com. So Beyond the Plan is the um, practice, the business name. You can check us out there. Planning and Beyond is the podcast, and it's on all major listening podcast platforms. So Apple, Spotify, even on YouTube. You can check us out there. And so, yeah, we'd love, love, love for you to check out Beyond the Plan, Planning and Beyond, myself, anywhere and everywhere. So feel free to reach out as well. I love hearing from folks and getting to meet new people in the space.
Awesome. Well, that's great. And for everybody watching and listening, as always, there will be links to Ashley's website, podcast, and LinkedIn profile. So you can go to the show notes as well to find those links. So, Ashley, thanks for coming on the podcast and sharing your insights today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Tony.
Yeah, this is a great conversation. And as always, everybody, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If you learned something today to change your relationship with money, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. You can also go to my website, tonystewart.com, to join the Get Ready movement, receive my newsletter, and access to a whole range of tools for free. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.